and welcome to Training Tuesday again. It is Tuesday night. It is another rainy night here in New England. It's been raining all day, honestly. It hasn't been pretty. And I am happy, however, to welcome you all to Training Tuesday again. Tonight's topic is the growth mindset. And I thought about tonight's topic partly because it came up in some conversations in the last couple of weeks about exploring new opportunities and trying to figure out how to negotiate some difficult conversations. And in the threads of these other themes and conversations I was talking about, what kept popping up in my mind was, if we all had the growth mindset, this could solve some problems. But we don't, and there's reasons why. So as I started thinking about it, I thought, that growth mindset too, it's one of those phrases, I see it all the time on Facebook. There's always, memes, inspirational memes and quotes around it. And if you're on LinkedIn at all, it's all over LinkedIn, right? Simon Sinek is always talking about the growth mindset, playing the infinite game. Gary V, right? Gary Vaynerchuk talks about the growth mindset. If you're on TED Talks at all, it was Carol Dweck, I think, who did the first TED Talk, and she's credited with discovering the growth mindset, which I always find kind of interesting because I guess the growth mindset would be a concept, right? An approach, but I don't think of it as being discovered because it's always been there, but she named it. So maybe that's what it is. So maybe it is a discovery. And I see that Miss Jackie and Jill are here. Hey, ladies, how are you doing? Good to see you. So when you talk about the growth mindset, it sounds like one of those marketing terms, and it kind of is. But I figured it's worth exploring because, it sounds like a good thing, right? It sounds like something we should all have and want and be. And then I thought, but what does that mean? Like, what is actually a growth mindset? And then how do you get there? How can you tell me that I don't have a growth mindset? I'm open-minded. I think about things, right? So that's what got me thinking, why don't we spend a little time digging into the definition of, what represents a growth mindset? And so why does that matter? And how? How do we get ourselves to this place where the growth mindset is just part of who we are, how we think, how we behave as leaders? Because when you see all of these business and leadership people that you admire talking about it and saying this is the way it needs to be, right? We go into this automatic, yeah, of course, that makes total sense. That's absolutely right. And the way they describe it is fairly high level, right? Growth mindset is about being open to possibilities. It's being open to discussion. Yeah, it is. But that's actually a little bit harder to do than to simply say, I'm open. And I find a lot of times we're not as open as we think we are. So I was going to start by just sharing a story, because that's what I do. My very first professional job, meaning I was no longer a student and I was working full-time with no more school in sight. So my first job out of grad school, I got thrown into an interesting startup environment where they gave me far more responsibility than I deserved. It was a startup, so in fairness, they really didn't have anybody else. And I had a graduate degree, so I think they figured I was more qualified to know things. But I went to grad school for literature, and they didn't teach me how to manage business. So they really gave me a lot more responsibility than I had earned at that point. I walked into managing this small startup with a lot of expectations around how things were supposed to be, right? Expectations about how people should behave and what the office should look like and sound like and all that good stuff. And there was nothing wrong with my expectations. I think, in fact, a lot of the expectations that I had are the same expectations I would have today for how to navigate an office environment and how to behave and scheduling and all this stuff. But I didn't have a clue how to really manage my team. I didn't understand maybe how to meet their expectations. And I will say that unfortunately, I had a pretty dictatorial style. Now, I did work all through college, and I worked with teams, but I never really managed. I'm trying to think if I actually managed teams. I managed a store, but I didn't have any employees really that worked under me on a given shift, right? There were a couple of junior people that did this or did that or whatever, but I didn't really run the team. I ran the store. So I didn't really have a management position for where I was responsible for people and how they behaved to customers or how they answered the phone or, just, or what their schedules were. So my style, which was pretty much, I'm a manager, so I'm the boss, so you need to do what I say, was pretty blunt and direct, which is still how I am. Also very unfortunate because not everybody loves that very direct, I'm your boss, so you have to do what I say. And I hadn't learned more of the finesse of how you manage. So I didn't have a bad relationship with my team, but I wasn't exactly earning brownie points and building anything in particular here. I was literally just running day to day. And I was noticing over the course of a couple weeks that my tech team, I had a tech team of 4 people, that the tech team, they were just like taking longer and longer lunches. And, we were all, including me as the manager, we were all hourly. And we actually had a sign-in sheet. And they would sign in their sign-in sheet that they went to lunch at 12 and they came back at 1, but really they came back at 1:20 and really they left at 11:50, right? So I'm noticing the time because I'm running the office and I'm the manager and I'm trying to track everything. But this group would take lunch at the same time. They would put kind of an out of office on the phone saying, we're out of the office for lunch. We'll be back at 1. And, if they were back at 1:15, they were back at 1:15. Well, this went on for a while, a couple weeks, like not a long period of time, but I noticed it kept happening. And so I basically said, okay, they're consistently late. It's wrong. They're eating up company time. So I docked their pay. I basically turned in the timesheets and adjusted them for the hours they actually worked as opposed to their, they didn't get credit for their extra long lunch breaks. I told them after the fact that I was docking their pay. And they got basically a shorted paycheck that week. I was right. That was my thing. I was right. They did not work the hours they claimed to have worked. They were taking long lunches. They were shorting the time. And so I was correct. Was it the right way to handle the situation? Let's say probably not, likely not. No, it was not. It was not the right way to handle the situation. But I was so sure that I was right because my principles were right. And I had that very black and white. Actions have consequences. There's a right and wrong. And there are ways we do things. And we don't show up late. And we don't take these long lunches. And we don't charge the company for it. But being right cost me. Because the business owner then had to come in and sit me down and talk to me about, okay, so maybe they were doing this thing and maybe you were right, but don't you think there could have been another way to handle it? But being right and that whole justice piece of there's a right and a wrong and actions have consequences were so ingrained in me that I left that meeting really angry and really disappointed in him as the business owner. And in the team for not recognizing they had done something wrong. These are not bad concepts, right? Right and wrong and fairness, right? Action and consequences are good concepts. In fact, they're great concepts. So they weren't my challenge. My challenge was the way that I just locked in that because I was morally correct, people must be accountable, and there's only one way for that to play out. And the way for that to play out in fairness was for me to dock their pay so that they only got paid for what they actually worked. I did not have the understanding or the generosity of a learning curve, of training, of a journey, of negotiation, of everybody making adjustments. We were a startup. We were all young. There wasn't one of us over 30 in that office. I had to think for a very long time about what that whole situation was and what that meant, and how everybody in the office could be mad at me, and there was all this tension, and somehow it was my fault, even though I was right. So being stubborn and being stuck in this very black and white mindset did not help me grow as a manager. It did not teach me how to manage teams better. It did not teach me how to do my job better. It created this rut for me, and it created this tension in the office that wasn't necessary. And it made me separate from the team. I was no longer part of the team. I was no longer part of this startup environment. I was too busy trying to manage them to behave the way I expected them to behave. So there was no growth, there was no movement, there was no joy at all. And it was only after reflection and some time that I had to sit back and go, I'm doing this wrong. Something in what I am doing is wrong. Not because my right and wrong were incorrect, but there must be a different way to handle it. There must be. I'm being told there is, but I'm not being told what it is, so I don't know what to do. So I'm going to pause there, because what I just shared with you was my story of how not to be in a growth mindset. And what I'm really curious about is how you define a growth mindset. I would love for you to share in the chat with me. Drop a few keywords in, write a sentence, however it is, however you want to share it. But what to you is a growth mindset? And while you think about that, and while you write what your definition of a growth mindset is, I will say hello. My name is Natalie Hahn. I am CEO of Dirty Girls Consulting, and you are here on Training Tuesday in Accelerating Leadership for Professional Women. And tonight's topic is all about the growth mindset. As always, you can see in the comments that Jackie and Jill have said hello. I invite everybody to say hi, tell us where you're from, tell us why you're here. Most importantly, right now, be part of the conversation and tell me a little bit about what are the top 2 or 3 keywords you think of when you think of growth mindset. What does it mean to you? Why are you here tonight to learn about a growth mindset? Why does it matter? I can tell you what it wasn't. It wasn't being locked in. It wasn't being right or wrong. It wasn't any of those things. So let's see. We've got Jackie saying thinking big, setting aside time to think rather than always chipping away at the small stuff. Although that matters too. It does matter. Jill, sleeping on an issue for 24 hours before providing feedback. Yeah. Hey, these are great. So yeah, because what both of you are pointing to is being thoughtful and responding, not reacting, right? And the growth mindset is definitely about being thoughtful. You're tapping into some pieces also that we'll talk about. Hey, Gretchen, welcome. Thriving on challenges. Yes, that is a great way of framing it. Sue, I'm glad to see you. Open to a different perspective. Absolutely. Absolutely. So those are all great pieces of the growth mindset. So we're going to talk about all of those. I want to start with what I think is the linchpin. Nasia, I've missed you, my friend. Acceleration and acting upon your goals. Yes, there's a big part of growth mindset that is about taking action. Not ruminating, not sitting back and wondering what's going on, but taking action. I love it. This group of ladies, by the way, just you all don't know each other, but I know you. You guys are all like rock stars. When we talk about ambitious women who are accelerating their careers, you guys are it, by the way. Just so say hi to each other. You guys are absolutely it. There's one key to growth mindset that I think is the hardest piece for us to conquer when it comes to growth mindset. And it's the piece that, for me anyway, I revisit it constantly. Growth mindset is all of those things, right? The growth mindset is all about being open to new ideas, new perspectives, to what the goals are, and being flexible maybe about how you get there, to adding new goals that you never thought were possible, right? It is about being thoughtful about how you approach things, taking views into consideration. It's about knowing that there's a North Star and a big goal. But in order to do all of that, right, in order to get there, there's one key move we have to make, and it's really, really hard. If you have any guesses, I'd love to hear them, but I am just going to tell you, just so you know. But the key to the growth mindset is in your ego. It is in setting your ego aside so that you can listen. It's setting your ego aside so that you don't have to be right. You don't have to have the answer. You don't have to be the leader or the one who gets credit. Being vulnerable, yeah. Setting your ego aside is the ultimate test of vulnerability. Because what you do when you put your ego aside is you open up the floor for everybody to participate, to venture an idea, to tell you you're wrong, right? And you don't take it personally. And those two things go hand in hand, right? Setting aside your ego means you're not taking it personally, because that problem you're solving, that project you're working on, that goal you're trying to achieve, that team that you're leading, it's not about you. It's not about them specifically. It's about the thing, right? It's about the goals. It's about the end game. When you can take your own ego out of it, you're more focused then on getting the full perspective and being open to, there are literally 10 ways to solve this problem, and we're just trying to dig into what's the best one for who we are, where we are, the moment that we're in. But it's not about I. And what happens when we are in the anti-growth mindset, right, in the opposite, is we're tend to be focused on I. I was focused on being right. It was important for me to be right. It was important for me to have control, because if I didn't have those things, I must not be a good leader. When in fact, I was completely destroying my standing as a manager, right? My relationship with my team, by grounding myself into being right and being in control, rather than stepping back and saying, maybe there's a different way to solve this problem. Maybe there's a different conversation we could have. Maybe they would have a solution on how they can show up from lunch on time. But even just opening the conversation, there was no two-way with me. Growth mindset is about focusing on the ideas behind the feedback or the criticism. It's about focusing on the possibility of the opportunity, rather than, I already went down this path. I already thought about this. I've thought this through. This is what we're going to do, right? Growth mindset leaders, they listen, they think, they consider all the options, so that when they hear criticism, when they're presented with a new idea, when they're presented with an unexpected challenge, they don't turn inward and think, what did I do wrong? How did I miss this? Instead, they turn outward and they say, how do we solve this? And it's a we, it's a royal we. How are we going to solve this? What are we going to do? I want you to think about the last time someone said to you, look, I know you said this, or I know you had this idea, but I think that, and then they launched a different opinion, an opposite opinion. What happened? The moment you heard the phrase, I know, but, so you know a but is coming, you know somebody's going to disagree with you, what happened to you in that moment? For me, most of the time when my ego is feeling attacked, right? When I'm feeling like I'm being challenged, that I didn't think something through enough, or I wasn't smart enough, I didn't have a good idea, I get a knot in my stomach. I get a nice, hot, fiery knot in my stomach, and then I start to feel a little bit nauseous. My sense of confidence is attacked. For some people, when they hear that challenge, their throat locks up. They feel like they don't have voice to speak, or they're not being heard. And for others, you get the fluttering in your chest, right? You get the heart palpitations or the shallow breath, right? And you're feeling attacked, and usually that's an emotional attack. You know, that's the feeling of, oh my God, they think I'm stupid. They think terrible things about me. So sometimes in that moment, if you feel it in a different place in your body, you can recognize in you what part of your ego, yourself, is feeling under fire. Which, by the way, while it's valid, is also very different than what the person is actually saying. And those are the two pieces that we have to tease out, right? So what happens, we get defensive. When somebody says, have you thought about this? Because I was thinking you might want to do it this way. And we immediately go into, no. I mean, I did think about that, and that's not the way I'm going to do it. Even if we never thought about it, right? We immediately get defensive. But I already considered all the options. Here's my path. And what we're kind of saying is, I'm smart, damn it. I figured this out, right? Don't ask me questions. I'm not stupid, right? We're defending ourselves. But we're defending ourselves against what's usually not an actual attack. It is a suggestion from somebody who's been through it before, or looks at it a different way, or just thinks they have a really great idea. And if you come from a background like mine, and I know some of you, so I know you do, right? Marketing, and actually I've heard this said by many HR people too, everybody thinks they know how to do your job. Everybody thinks they can do marketing better than the marketing people. So what do we hear all the time? Hey, I have this great idea. Have you thought about doing this for the campaign? And as marketers, I'm just getting kind of job specific here because it's a good example, right? We cringe, right? Just don't tell me how to do the job. I have worked for 3 weeks on this stupid campaign. I know what it's going to do. Stop interrupting my work. And it feels like an interruption and a distraction. And all that other person is doing is throwing their ideas at you because they're excited that they might contribute to your job. It's not great, but it is what it is. The growth mindset steps back and says, they might have a valid idea. It might be useful. Thank you for opening my head up to that. That's good to know. The Queen Elizabeth in me, by the way, always says, thank you for your input. I will take that under consideration. There are times when we are right and we just plow on our merry way. But for the growth mindset, let's get back to growth mindset. There's really only one way to break the pattern. There's really only one way to put the ego aside, right? Open up our minds to the opportunity and the possibilities, to break this pattern where we feel like we have to prove that we're right and prove that we're smart. Do you know what it is? You're going to love it. Any guesses on what the one thing is you have to do to break this pattern and to move yourself into a growth mindset where you're not taking things personally? I've said it before, actually. We've covered it on training calls before. We will cover it on training calls again. Because the one thing you have to do to move yourself to a growth mindset is you have to practice. It just takes practice. And with practice comes awareness, and with awareness comes practice. So when you practice putting your ego aside and taking that breath, and when you practice opening up your mind and accepting that there might be a new way to do something and you're not stupid because you didn't think of it, when you can practice saying yes instead of no, you get better at it. And then you start to get more curious, and then you start to ask questions. But it's practice. You have to catch yourself, and then you have to do things a different way. So for me, when I was finally getting some awareness around the fact that maybe my management style wasn't really working for me. Maybe if I wanted to actually have a career and advance that career and run teams and run a business and do things, I had to think about things differently. I had to actually think about, how did it feel to be in the shoes of the team whose pay I docked? Again, first job out of college for pretty much all of us. We were all in our early to mid 20s. We were all living paycheck to paycheck. How did it feel to be in their shoes? What was that moment of empathy I could have that would say, hey, maybe the way I approached that was not the best idea? All right, so for me, it was a lot. It took time. Like, I didn't turn around the next day and go to my boss, oh man, I really screwed up, I'm sorry. Like, it took me several weeks to start thinking through, maybe there's a different way. And it took me several months to rebuild a relationship with that team so that there was a level of trust again. So it's an effort, it's a practice, and it's an ongoing one. So here are the few tips I have for you in terms of the growth mindset, right? If we want to go to a growth mindset, actually, before I get to the tips, let me just say, we want to go to the growth mindset. Why? Because the growth mindset brings a whole different energy, right? If you've worked with somebody who's been in a growth mindset, you've worked with a leader who has that mindset, they bring a completely different energy to the table. Part of that energy is trust. They build trust. They create a safe place for ideas to be thrown out there, for conversations to happen, for things to change on a dime if they need to. Because they've told you this is a safe place to throw out your ideas. And no, we may not take all of them, but we hear them. To be able to build that level of trust, you first have to trust yourself. You have to trust that you know enough, that you're smart enough, that you know enough, that you're experienced enough, that you're intuitive enough, that it doesn't matter what others think. You know yourself, what you know what you would do, and you are open to the idea that there may be other possibilities out there. So trust starts with you and then expands to other people. When you start developing this mindset and really carrying it forward, you really do open the possibilities. Not just the possibilities of how you solve a problem or how you go after something, but you open the possibilities for what you can achieve, of how much further you can go, or a completely different direction that you never thought of before. It is genuinely a mind-opening exercise. And as we talked about earlier, and I think Nasia was the one who said it enforces in many ways forward motion. When you have a growth mindset and you are looking at the opportunities and you are looking at the possibilities and the goals you're trying to achieve, and you are open to the ideas that are happening, you are naturally creating forward motion, because everybody gets excited about that. You're not dwelling in the what happened, what did I do, how did that happen. You're not dwelling in the elements of a situation that mire us down, the he said, the she said, that we did this thing wrong, oh my gosh, it's terrible, right? We're not dwelling in the mire and the muck. We are looking at what helps us do more, what helps us achieve more. And that's exciting energy. That's very forward motion energy. So when you move into a growth mindset, you're opening possibilities for your career, for your growth, as well as for what are you achieving for the business? What are you achieving for team members, right? It's a huge expansion process. So your first tip on just developing this is really be aware of your ego. Pay attention to when it flares up, where it flares up, when it stops a conversation. We know it's our ego when our first reaction is nope. Self-protection of the ego, nope, not happening. Take a breath. What are you protecting yourself from? What's causing that nope? And what if it didn't matter? What if it didn't matter who got the credit? What if it didn't matter how you actually achieve the goal? We forget that sometimes the person who came up with the greatest idea is not actually the person who executes it. So it's actually much less important who gets credit for the idea and much more important of did we implement it and was there an outcome that we can measure? Was there a benefit to this? And even if somebody else gets the credit and you didn't, and you thought it was yours to get credit for, what's the worst that happens? It's never as bad as we think. When we make it all about ourselves and our ego, we get stuck in that, but I have to do this. I have to manage this. I have to control this, which means there's only my way of doing it. Having a true growth mindset means we put the ego aside and we don't worry about that other stuff. And instead, we create a whole new energy and we energize the team to move forward with open mindset, open plan. Second tip, feedback, right? The first place where we shut down is when people give us feedback or criticism. And there are plenty of occasions where it's perfectly fine to pull out your inner Queen Elizabeth and say, thank you for the feedback. I will take that under consideration and walk away. With a growth mindset, though, there are also plenty of times where we treat feedback like data, because that's what it is. We're not worried about our personal feelings or standing. We are looking at the data. This is information somebody is giving to me about the situation or about the challenge. And now I'm going to cycle it through. I'm going to listen to it. Is there validity to this? Does this improve the process? Does this improve my outcome? What are the drawbacks to this? What are the benefits to this? You give it balanced consideration. Data is something you should treat like improv. Data is a yes and. When you're doing improv, if you've ever done an improv workshop, improv is all about you have to accept. The number one rule of improv, you have to accept what the other actor has thrown at you. It's a yes, you said that thing, yes, and I'm going to add and I'm going to build on this. If you can think of feedback as your yes and moment, it's yes, I hear you, I'm listening, and I'm going to build on top of that. Building on top of that might be the recognition that this feedback actually isn't valid, but you've given it its due consideration. Building on top of that might be this feedback is valid and there's a new direction I can go in, and there's a different way I'm actually going to use that feedback. So I always like to think of feedback as an improv exercise. It's a yes and. Third tip, reframe your failures. We call them failures because it didn't work according to our expectations. But oftentimes, and you guys know this, and we hate it, right? We hate it. What are the lessons learned? What did you learn out of this failure? We use that in personal relationships. Oh, it was a terrible relationship, but I learned so much. And we don't love some of those lessons. But there's validity to this perspective, right? What do we learn about the projects that go sideways? What do we learn about the outcomes we didn't get? And the reason I want to say reframe your failures is partly because of how you show up as a leader when you talk about initiatives that did or didn't produce the outcomes you want. When we're showing up as a leader, it's one thing to say, just going back to marketing because that's my field, that campaign was terrible. It didn't give us the leads. It didn't give us the pipeline. Yeah, it failed. That may be true. Those metrics may be very real. But the other truth is that you probably learned something from it. You probably got something out of that experience. So what was it? So what if instead of going and saying to your team or to the leadership and saying, the campaign was a failure, we didn't get our pipeline, we didn't get our leads. And what if instead you said, here's how the campaign went. We told this story, we got this customer feedback, and now we know our customers like to talk about these two things. They are comfortable with this story element, not that one. They want to engage with us via chat, not via phone, and price didn't really matter to them. That's what we learned from this campaign. We did not get the leads and we did not get the pipeline, but we did get this other information that means the next campaign I run for you, we're going to feed into that and we're going to see what we can achieve out of this. That's a very different conversation than walking in and saying, yeah, we didn't hit our goals. Oh, well. Right? So a growth mindset is a leadership mindset because it allows you to see there was a bigger picture here. Our time wasn't wasted. Our money wasn't wasted. Our investment wasn't wasted. We did learn important lessons that we are applying as we move forward. Always forward motion. Fourth tip, I also want you to reframe success. Success, yes, there are actions, there are metrics. So there are some very black and white hard statistics or facts that you're going to look at that will measure success. I want you to reframe success because it's not about those numbers. It's about what you think. If you walk into that meeting and say you failed, everyone else believes you failed. If you walk into that meeting and say, here's what we succeeded at, everyone believes you succeeded. The words you use and how you frame it have power. And I want you to use that. It will help and change your internal dialogue to a more open mindset, but it will also open the mindset of the people around you. So I'm just reading Nasia's comment here for a minute. Reframing your failures, an insightful and productive way to turn. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And yeah, that's exactly right. It could be viewed as a failure, but it isn't necessarily, because guess what? If you hadn't invested in that campaign, if you hadn't invested in that test or that, whatever the effort was, whatever the project was, you wouldn't know what you know today. You wouldn't have that information. It's the same thing with success. When you can start framing what was successful and start with that, you do shift the mindset of the people around you to, oh, okay, we didn't hit that goal, but we did learn something. We start shifting the culture that we're in to say, here's what you can expect from me. Yeah, you can expect that sometimes I'm going to kill my numbers and sometimes I'm going to miss them. But in every situation, I'm going to look for what else can I mine from this? What else can I take away from this that's going to help us do better next time? What's going to help me move forward next time? So you want to reframe success just like you reframe your failures. You want to ensure that when you're talking about success, that you're educating everyone around you that success comes in many forms. And some of it is statistics, and some of it is money, and some of it is information, and all of it is usable. Last tip, when it comes to building that environment of trust, the growth mindset means you are actually trusting people around you to do their jobs. You are trusting that people around you want to do their best. You trust your boss to have your back. You trust your colleagues to do what they say they're going to do. You trust that your ideas will be received, that you will be listened to. And trust is a really tricky thing, because to build trust, you have to trust. And to trust, you want to have trust built, right? It's that catch-22 cycle of chicken and egg, right? Which comes first? And the truth is, you have to take a leap of faith. You as the leader show, I'm trusting that you guys are all smart people and you know what you're doing. I'm trusting that I'm a smart person and I know what I'm doing. And I'm trusting that together we are going to come with a much better solution to this challenge than what I could do alone. Based on my experience, here's what I know, here's what I think, here's what my intuition tells me. But now I want to know, based on yours, what do you think? The most important trust factor is you trusting yourself. You will never get your ego out of the way if you don't trust that you know things. You are capable of things. You already have and bring value to the conversation. If you don't trust that, no one else trusts it either. We have to trust ourselves first. And when we can trust that we're not going to look stupid just because we ask a question, we're not going to look unprepared because we ask for help. When we can trust that, then we open ourselves up to the growth mindset. One of the ways that we can do that is by remembering that anytime someone else asks us for our opinion or asks us for help, is our first thought, oh my God, you're an idiot? Never. Our first thought is never, you're an idiot. Our first thought is, I'm so glad they asked me. I'd be happy to share my opinion. I would be happy to help you. We never think less of another person when they open themselves up to being vulnerable that way. But we always think less of ourselves. That's the first mindset shift that has to happen. You have to trust yourself and create that safe environment for yourself if you're going to create the safe environment for other people to participate and create that growth mindset. Because growth mindset is not a single person activity. The whole key to growth mindset is it's about including everybody. It's about being open to everything. You don't do it by yourself. So, in summary, The ego is the first and hardest piece to get out of the way. So ego awareness and how you manage that. Feedback is data. Reframe your failures. Reframe your successes. Build trust first in yourself. And as you build it in yourself, you will build it with other people. All right. So that's where I'm going to leave it tonight because, wow, I went over time. I apologize for going over. I'm usually about 30 minutes if you haven't joined me before. It's usually about 30 minutes. Sometimes I go over because I like to share. And the more you guys talk, the more I have to respond to, which is always great. Keep in mind the growth mindset is a constant practice. Our ego is with us constantly. It's giving us messages constantly. We are always going to be kind of fighting back and pushing back on it. And that's fine. It's healthy. It's normal. It's human. And sometimes our ego is not wrong, and it is a bad idea, and we shouldn't go down that path. So learning when to listen and how to listen is critical in this, and that's all about self-awareness. So constant practice, it's breaking patterns, it's breaking old habits, but it's good work. It's hard work, but it's good work. So if you would like to explore that more, I would like to offer you a chance to dig into your ego or your habits and your patterns, or how to have more of a growth mindset by offering a free coaching call, 15 minutes, and it's free. It's called the Dirty Girl Mini Dig, and it's exactly what I said, is we're digging deeper into one aspect and getting you moving one step closer to achieving your goals. And you get that by just dropping the word dig in the comments, and I will reach out to you and we will schedule that time for a chat. So it's a free coaching call. It's 15 minutes because we can do a lot in a focused 15 minutes. Not a sales pitch, not moving on to anything else. Just want a chance for you to really focus on the topic tonight or any other Training Tuesday night. Dig a little deeper and ensure that you have clarity around where you're going, what you want to achieve, and how you're going to get there. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, just drop the word dig in the comments below and I will reach out to you to schedule that call. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a fabulous week. Thank you all for your comments and thank you for joining me. And I will see you next week on Training Tuesday.